Okay, but we'll crack on because we haven't got long, Ignacio. So the title of today's talk, Adapting Sustainable Infrastructure for a Greener 2030. So the premise of this is that infrastructure is not a clean slate as we move towards a more sustainable 2030. We can't just start from scratch. We already have a lot of infrastructure in place, and that means adapting what we already have. The infrastructure previously has prioritized economic and social growth more, and now we have to find ways to make that infrastructure sustainable as we maintain, update, and adapt it. So, yes, as we said, we've got Ignacio here from Saka Concessions. Saka is a developer of large-scale infrastructure projects that uses a public-private partnership model, which we're going to get into the sort of advantages of how that can help this effort to improve infrastructure for the sake of the planet. So, first of all, before we get into some of the examples of what you're working on, Ignacio, can you just talk about what are the main issues affecting the development of green infrastructure? Because we can't just easily replace our roads or our bridges or our transport hubs. What are the big issues facing us that you guys are needing to address?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you, South Summit and everybody here to spend some time here listening to us. And I expect that we can share some knowledge to you. But as we spoke before, I think there is a challenge with the existing infrastructure because everybody assumes that when you are building new infrastructure, you already think in 2030 in complying with every kind of sustainability goal and criteria design. But what happens with the infrastructure that already exists? No, there is a challenge there in order to go there and improve and reduce the footprint and the impact. And in that way, I was telling you here in Spain, we have several examples of infrastructure with more than 15 years that was built 15 years ago, and now we have to operate it and during that operation, we face the challenge of how to reduce the impact we are creating in our entourage. No? And in that way, there are several ways in which we can comply. We can try to reduce that. And first is when you have to attempt to make a repavement of a road, for example, you try to use new materials. There has been huge advantages in the use of materials that allow us to reduce the quantity that you need, and also it allows you to use some of the material. You are reusing them. You are introducing circular economy because you are using some of the waste, and instead of throwing it away, you are getting it together, treating it, and putting back into the infrastructure. So that gives you a longer life cycle, and at the same time, it allows you to reduce your CO2 footprint and the rest. And also it's efficient because right now, today, transport is very expensive. That's one way. There are some other ways in which we have buildings, and up until now, being energy efficient was not really an issue. But today, with the energy prices, we have to try to look for different ways to try to optimize and reduce our consumption. So, for example, here in Madrid, we've got the Moncloa Transport Hub, which I think everybody knows how had used it during the last years. Climate, to be able to provide cold in summer and heat in winter is very expensive. So we are introducing new technologies like the use of geothermal energy. We are using geothermal interchange with the ground we have a project like that. It's called Geobat. We are also trying to use solar energy, but instead of using the typical square or rectangle glass panel, we are using a film that film can take different forms. In this case, it's circular. So we are using it to try to improve and get more from less. No? And I think there are two examples. And what is interesting from Safir point of view is that we are using, we are we are committed to innovation, and we are doing it with the collaboration of several players, startups, that we go to the market and we say we have several problems, and that's called SACID challenges. And this year we have more than 200 proposals. So with those proposals, then we select a few, the few that we think are more suitable, and we invest in them, but not from the lab point perspective, but in real projects, so we can be able to check whether they are or not successful.
Yeah, well, there's lots to get into there. Let's talk about this geothermal example, because I'm always, as a non-engineer, slightly baffled by the idea of how you dig underground under an existing city. Like, what is the challenge? Explain how this geothermal system works, because it's quite amazing.
Well, I think that's a very old technology, but we forget about that because the Romans used to warm their houses geothermal, no? And in Finland, or no, in Iceland they use it too. But here, what is true that the ground is a kind of natural regulator. It always more or less, when you dig in the ground, you find more or less an stable temperature. So what we are doing is we make some digs into the ground in order to exchange heat or cold from the surface with the ground. And it's kind of battery, a water battery.
So it's a kind of passive heat regulation system.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's a lot of work to put into place, and it's something that you're kind of doing currently now. And
Yes, we have a project. We started with startup, and it's called Geobat, and we have implemented a pilot in Moncloa, and so far it's doing very good. We are getting cost efficiencies of almost 7%, so I think we are going the right way.
yeah, and your roads one that you mentioned earlier, that example where you use the old road material that has gone out of date and needs to be replaced, you use that to go into the new road surface, right?
Yes.
What are the kinds of, can you quantify the savings on behalf of the environment and financially for the company?
Well, that one is a pilot, but we've got another product that is called RAREX, and RAREX is also a new material that uses in part of their formula or composition. We use used tires, which are a difficult waste to treat. You usually have dumpers of tires, so we use them and we put them into this new formula. And this formula allows us to get a better, how to say, a better endurance. So we've got better endurance, and also we've got less material to use. So with that, we've got efficiencies that help us both. You need less material, that's the first one. You need less transport, and also, as it has a longer endurance, you've got a longer life cycle. And that was so successful that right now we are opening a plant in Mexico to provide this solution to the LATAM market.
Okay, so recycling
Yes.
wasted tires and putting them into the road
Yes,
surface.
that's called RAREX, and it's a very interesting product.
And your company has quite a big Latin American footprint, doesn't it? You've got
Yes.
some exciting projects going on in Colombia. Tell us what's going on with the water systems that you're doing there with that infrastructure.
That's the last project we have been awarded. We are very proud because when we speak of sustainability, we usually always see infrastructure of a thing that is always against nature, because it's true that when you connect two points, you have to alter the terrain, the ground, and that has an impact both in the communities and everywhere. But this project was an idea from the Colombian government, in which a decade ago they had some floods that affected a population of 1.5 million people. So when you say that, you see that's a huge lot of people. And this is a canal that was built in the 16th century to connect Rio Magdalena, which is the biggest river in Colombia, with Cartagena port. And 5 centuries of water going has produced two things: floods, because the river sediments don't travel anymore to the sea, but are along the road. So when comes a lot of water, it results in a flood. And second is a change of the ecosystem, because at the beginning there were marshes near Cartagena city that were sea marshes. So they had a high level of salinity, and they had accordingly a fauna and flora used to that. With the fresh water coming from the Rio Magdalena, those marshes are now freshwater marshes. So there is a new ecosystem. It has been in place for the last 200-300 years. But with this project, the government has two objectives. It's not to increase the commerce through the river. It's not that. It's to control the floods, and also to restore the ecosystem to the original ecosystem. So and it's very difficult, but we are, I mean, and that's a great challenge. But in our company, we are very, very happy and also expectant. And also the investment funds, the financing world is, we are seeing that with every single day they are looking for more projects that are green. I don't like the green word. I mean, they are sustainable, and they look to reduce the impact. This Colombian project also, we have the obligation to work with the communities. There are 1.5 million people. There are very poor communities, and we are working with them in order to help them improve their way of life. So we've got everything that when you are speaking of sustainability, which is part of our DNA, they wouldn't allow me to lie, which are people, environment, communities, and also corporate governance. So we've got everything there in one single project, and we are very excited.
How do you do that? How do you turn around 300 years of ecosystem change that humans created with this canal?
Well, we have to be patient. We have to have innovation. Any solution, we have to control the water level, engineering, and also to work very closely with environmentalist people, no? Because it's a project that has to reshape the environment of one part of the country.
And you mentioned that, there's an investor climate and, environment now where you are much more likely to get money if you are working in a green way and working in a sustainable way. How does that affect your business? Tell us about, is that for you about winning government tenders?
Not so much, because I think that governments are starting to look for companies that are green, and we've got several indexes in the most important sustainable indexes. But I think from the financial point of view, the banks and investment funds are allocating part of the resources for projects that, according to them, are green. And these kind of projects usually get better financing rates. So at the end of the day, it's just money that you are improving your project, with.
So you go out to a bank to help you finance a project, and that conversation is easier.
It's easier because they see that it's a project that has that complies. I mean, this South Summit is about 2030 being today, no? And I think that's because everybody around here is interested and is invested in changing our future and trying to make it more sustainable. And that's the force that is behind most of the projects and behind the banks and the money, because they see that we are looking to change the world and to try to recover it and make it a better one for our children. And I think that the banks have listened to that. Money is very quick to listen. And the society is the biggest stakeholder behind sustainability change.
Yeah, and it's certainly true that perhaps their biggest power is they vote with their wallets, right? And consumers more than ever are keen for sustainability and sustainable propositions. And I just wanted, we haven't got too long, but, you know, it's an interesting structure that your company runs, the public-private partnership, and, you know, tell us why that's a favourable way for a government to run an infrastructure project.
Because when we enter into a project, we see the whole life cycle. We don't just see the design, we just don't see the building, or we just don't see the operation. We just see the whole life cycle, and we design them to endure the whole life. And usually this helps because there is only one vision. Could be wrong, of course, but one vision is usually better when you try to put an infrastructure which affects, because usually the person who designs doesn't think in the long term. Probably sometimes there are no resources, so that's why some infrastructure is not well preserved, because it's easier to allocate resources to things that you can inaugurate and be on the news. But to invest money to preserve, that's very difficult. To invest money to treat water, you don't see water being treated, but it's necessary, it's a need. But usually you prefer to build something new, no? So I think when you take into account the whole life cycle, in your design, you try to be more efficient and reduce cost.
Yeah, so you have a better overall picture of a project from start to finish. And just to finish up, I mean, there'll be, as you said, there's a lot of innovators here in the room at South Summit, and you guys work with startups. What would be your advice to a startup that wants to work with Sakir? Like, what are the things you're looking for when you assess these projects?
Well, I think we usually are very clear with what we need, and we have a very good people in innovations, and most of them are here supporting me. Thank you. And we have several ways of letting the people know we are on YouTube, internet. But the challenges is something that it really is very important, because it's where we say we have these needs and we need help. How can you help us? And we are open to different solutions. And when we select one, and we select several every year, we invest in them and we work with them, because it's not just, okay, you've got this problem, give me the solution. No, you are working with us, you are working with the business units, because at the end of the day, sustainability has to be efficient to be really the future.
Yeah, well, you've been efficiently right on time. We've only got 10 seconds left, so big round of applause for Ignacio. It's fascinating. Thank you very much.